Back in 2017, Samsung released the flagship Galaxy S8, and it was one of the best phones of that year. But in late 2019, how does it stand up to the rest? Today, I'll be going over all the important aspects of the Galaxy S8, and hopefully provide some insights into the longevity of Samsung devices. Let's go over some background information about the Galaxy S8. It was released in April of 2017, and it was widely considered one of the best phones of that year. It had great specs with a Snapdragon 835 paired with an Adreno 540, along with 4GB of RAM and 64GB of microSD expandable storage up to 1TB, had an 84% screen-to-body ratio, and either a 5.8-inch display or a 6.2-inch display on the S8 Plus, and this phone runs Android 9 with One UI on top. There is a 12-megapixel back camera and an 8-megapixel front camera, but I'll get into more detail about that later. Overall, this was a great flagship phone in 2017, so how does it stand up now? The first aspect of this phone that I'm going to go over is build quality. Even in 2019, this phone feels super solid. It's not too heavy at only 155 grams, but it still feels substantial enough when you're holding it. Also, there is nice curves around the body which make it a lot more ergonomic to hold and comfortable if you're going to hold your phone for a while, if you're watching a movie in a bus, for example. On the right side there is the power button, and on the left there are the volume buttons and the Bixby button. Fortunately, it can be disabled in Android 9, but I really wish you could remap it to the Google Assistant, which is the one thing that you cannot remap it to. On the bottom of the phone, there is a USB Type-C port and a headphone jack, which is a feature that's rapidly disappearing from new flagship phones. It's only really on budget devices now, so I guess you really don't get what you pay for. The other thing on the bottom is a single bottom firing speaker, which brings me right along to speakers. This phone does not have stereo speakers, which is unfortunate because there is an earpiece that could have easily been amplified. The single speaker on the bottom is not bad, but there is some distortion at high levels, and it is super easy to block while you're holding it in landscape mode, or even sometimes in portrait. In addition, you might need to cup the speaker with your hand if you really want to get good audio that's actually coming towards you. If you ignore all that though, it's a decent speaker. It sounds pretty good, and it's loud enough for normal use and media consumption. But speaking of media consumption, this screen is just amazing. The Galaxy S8 has a curved 5.8-inch Super AMOLED display with a resolution of 2960 by 1440, and I just love this screen. The colors are super punchy, and it's high resolution, and it's just great for media consumption and gaming and really everything you do on your phone. Although some people might call it oversaturated, I personally think it's great for day-to-day use. It just makes your phone look more vibrant and real. It is an 18.5 by 9 screen, so it's easily tall enough for scrolling through Instagram and such. And although I'm not a huge fan of the curved screen, as it increases the chance of accidental touches and makes it easier for your screen to break if you drop your phone, it does look really good and adds some functionality to the device, such as edge lighting and the edge screen, which allows you to quickly access your favorite apps. Let's talk about software. This phone is running Android 9 Pie with Samsung's One UI on top. Unfortunately, you will not be getting Android 10 on this device, as even for their flagship phones, Samsung only offers 2 years of OS updates. I think that's pretty disappointing, especially considering that this phone started for over $700. One UI is, in my opinion, and some people will disagree with me here, a huge improvement over TouchWiz and Samsung Experience, but it's still not great. There are tons of duplicate apps that I'll never use, and there are some weird design choices, and of course, our favorite assistant, Bixby. Even after all these years, Bixby is still really bad. Google Assistant is just miles better with better speech recognition and faster results, and just a wider sphere of knowledge. Well, One UI is also a pretty heavy skin, which means it slows the device down compared to a stock Android, or a lighter skin like Oxygen OS. However, there are some benefits to Samsung Skin. There's tons of customization for your device, it's really great for one-handed use, and there are lots of settings so you can tweak your experience exactly how you like it. Sadly, if you have the Snapdragon version of the Galaxy S8, the bootloader is locked, which means that you won't be able to get any custom ROMs on this phone, or even root it, which means you'll be stuck on Android 9 forever. So how does this 2017 flagship perform? For everyday use, just social media and like games, it performs pretty well. You will notice a few hiccups here and there or some laggy scrolling, but overall it's pretty good. The one complaint that I have is when opening and closing apps and also multitasking, there's often a slight delay before your touch really works. Games run pretty well on this device, especially light ones, but here and there a frame will drop. Heavier games work fine on medium settings, but if you're going to go on high settings, I would recommend a newer device, as it will get a bit laggy. Apps also take a bit longer to load than I would expect on this device. But if you're just going to use it for social media and some other light apps, this phone performs really well. There are only a few small stutters, and it won't be that annoying. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of benchmarks, as they don't really reflect real-world performance, but here they are. Of course, having a phone that performs well uses up battery. The Galaxy S8 has a 3000 mAh battery, which is not bad, it is bigger than the Pixel 4, but with lighter usage I can only really get about 4 hours of screen on time, which isn't great. With heavier usage, it sometimes goes down to as low as about 3 hours in a day, in some bad situations. Of course, this phone is almost 3 years old, so the battery has degraded over time, but it's not easy to replace, as the back glass is glued on, and it is glass, and glass breaks. Overall, the battery's not terrible, but it's definitely not up to par with newer phones. The next aspect of this phone is the camera. The Galaxy S8 has a 12-megapixel f1.7 aperture back camera, alongside an 8-megapixel f1.7 aperture front camera. There is no ultra-wide or telephoto lens, but in 2017, these weren't really a thing anyways. Photos taken in good lighting turn out pretty good if you don't need to zoom in too far, or else it'll get quite grainy. There is no portrait mode on this phone, but there's this selective focus which allows you to sort of blur out the background around subjects. It only really works sometimes, and sometimes misses on small details in photos, but it is useful in some situations. One area where this camera really falls off is night shots. They are super grainy and super noisy, and there's basically no detail. I would say that's the area where new flagships have really improved the most over recent years, because this is truly terrible. Video on this phone is decent, but not amazing. It's not super clear, but there is optical image stabilization to stabilize your shots in some situations. Let's move on to biometrics. First things first, don't use Face Unlock. It is super insecure, and it uses a photo of your face to unlock your phone, which means if someone else shows your phone a photo of you, it might unlock. It's super insecure, and I've actually tricked my S8 with a photo in the past. Just don't use it. Next up is the iris scanner. I personally found it slow and unreliable, and although having a brighter and whiter wallpaper did help, it was still unreliable and really not worth the trouble of looking like I was taking a selfie every time I wanted to unlock my phone. That leaves us with the fingerprint scanner. People will always complain about the location beside the camera, but I honestly got used to it in about 20 minutes, and the oleophobic coating around the camera lens really helps me to prevent smudging it. It's also convenient as it allows you to pull down the notification tray and shade from the back without reaching all the way to the top of your phone, which is just a convenient usability feature. So I've talked about the individual aspects of this phone, but how does it really feel in the day-to-day experience? I think it's a pretty enjoyable experience. It has good ergonomics, and it's not too big like some new phones, and the software isn't too bad even though it's not ideal. Performance is good unless you're a super heavy gamer, and the battery life isn't great, but it's decent enough most days. Cameras are good enough to capture things unless it's dark or you need a very close-up shot, and the videos are decent enough for capturing cool moments. Overall, this is a pretty good experience, especially considering that this is a 2017 phone. So, should you buy the Samsung Galaxy S8 in late 2019? I would advise against it. You won't be getting any more software updates, and this phone is still pretty expensive online, considering what you are getting. I think there are just much better phones available at around this price point in late 2019. I hope this video provided some insight into the longevity of this phone, and if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.